You think you know what unlimited looks like, but your definition of power is being deceived by the scale of history. You see the names Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, men who command global logistics and private space exploration, and you mark them as the absolute peak of human wealth. You see their billions as the ultimate ceiling of what a single human life can accumulate. But there is a hidden truth buried in the archives of the past that will shatter your perception of modern fortune. While these titans move markets and shape our digital future, they possess only a tiny fraction of what one specific man carried in his pockets in the 14th century. Imagine walking through a medieval marketplace where gold wasn't just a medium of exchange, but a physical weight of absolute sovereignty. This isn't just a matter of numbers. It's about the sheer concentration of power held by a single individual before the world fragmented into global markets. That man didn't just own assets, he owned the very ground you stand on and the rights to every soul upon it. The gap between a modern billionaire and a medieval sovereign isn't just wide, it's an abyss. By understanding this, you realize that while our era offers more influence, we have lost a level of concentrated, raw authority that remains unparalleled in human history. Imagine walking into a room where your very presence alone triggers an economic collapse that haunts a community for decades. It sounds like a nightmare of modern mythology, but in the world of high-stakes macroeconomics, this isn't a fantasy, it is a terrifying reality of systemic fragility. Think about the sheer weight of your footprint. One single decision, one individual's movement into a specific sphere of influence, can act as a structural toxin, dissolving the stability of markets and erasing the livelihoods of thousands in an instant. You aren't just walking into a room, you are stepping into a delicate web of trade, labor, and survival. When that web snaps under your weight, the fallout doesn't just vanish after a few weeks or months. It lingers, it rots, it creates a generational scar where businesses shutter, families lose their safety nets, and an entire region is forced to rebuild from the ashes of a collapse they never saw coming. Why does one person hold such devastating power? It's because our modern global economy is built on thin layers of trust and stability. When that foundation is breached by a single catalyst, the dominoes fall in a chain reaction that can paralyze local commerce for half a century. You are watching the anatomy of a catastrophe where your presence becomes the ultimate, irreversible trigger. You think you know what power looks like, but you have no idea how much wealth can actually shatter an entire economy in a single afternoon. Imagine walking into a city where your presence alone shifts the very foundations of their trade, turning gold into common dirt just by stepping across a threshold. That wasn't a myth or a legend. It was the lived reality of Mansa Musa, the ruler of the Mali Empire. We often speak of historical figures as distant icons. But for those living under his shadow, his reign was a tangible, overwhelming force that redefined the boundaries of global wealth. He didn't just possess riches, he wielded them as a geopolitical weapon so potent it caused the very markets of the Mediterranean to buckle and collapse. When he moved, gold flowed like water, and when he stopped, the local economies were left scarred by the sudden inflation. This wasn't a fairy tale told to children. It was a documented historical phenomenon that forced the world to redefine what a monarch could achieve. He didn't just rule a territory, he commanded a treasury so vast it felt supernatural to those who saw only a fraction of it. To understand Mansa Musa is to understand the terrifying scale of absolute wealth, a reality so immense it still haunts our modern understanding of power and prosperity today. You think you understand what it means to be wealthy in the modern age, but your definition of power is being dwarfed by a ghost from the past. In our era, billionaires are tracked by algorithms, monitored by satellites, scrutinized by tax codes, and mapped by the very digital footprints they leave behind. Their wealth is visible, quantified, and contained within the confines of modern systems. But there was a time when wealth wasn't just an entry in a database. It was a physical force capable of shattering the foundations of global trade. Musa's wealth was so vast that it didn't just compete with the market, it literally destabilized the global gold market. Imagine a fortune so concentrated, so massive, and so physically tangible that its mere presence caused the very systems of international exchange to buckle and fracture. While your net worth is measured in bits and bytes, his was measured in the literal weight of metal that dictated the stability of nations. When he moved, markets shifted. When his assets were accounted for, the global supply chain buckled under the pressure. He didn't just own a fortune, he commanded a volume of wealth so immense it broke the rules of the game, leaving a legacy that serves as a haunting reminder of what happens when individual wealth becomes more powerful than the systems designed to contain it. You are looking at a fortune so vast it shouldn't exist in our current economy, a mountain of physical wealth that dwarfs the market caps of the world's largest corporations. But how did one single man manage to bypass the gatekeepers and hoard more gold than the titans of modern industry? To find the answer, you have to look past the headlines and peer into a secret history buried under layers of bureaucracy. We have to look at a map you weren't taught in school. This isn't just a geographical chart. It is a blueprint of hidden jurisdictions and forgotten treaties that allowed private wealth to flow into shadows where oversight couldn't reach. While the public was told that gold was being moved into high-security vaults by central banks, a different trail was being blazed, one that led away from the eyes of regulators and into the hands of an elite few. Every turn on this map represents a loophole exploited, a territory ignored, and a financial sanctuary established in the cracks of global trade. If you follow the lines correctly, the narrative shifts from impossible luck to a calculated, masterful exploitation of geography. You are about to see how the landscape was manipulated to create a private empire, so massive that it makes modern billionaires look like small players in a much larger, more clandestine game. You might think you know what lies beneath the shifting sands, but you are looking at it through a lens of modern myth. You see a wasteland, a barren, silent void where life is impossible. But for Musa, the Sahara was never a desert. It was a roaring, golden highway pulsing with the rhythm of commerce and survival. Imagine standing on that scorching expanse, not as a victim of the heat, but as a master of its secrets. To Musa, every dune wasn't an obstacle. It was a corridor connecting the deep, beating heart of Africa directly to the distant shores of the Mediterranean. While you see a void, he saw a bridge. He saw a vital artery where gold, salt, and exotic spices flowed like blood across the continent. This wasn't just a wasteland of sand, it was a high-stakes corridor of movement, where every caravan was a lifeline of wealth and culture moving between two worlds. The Sahara was his theater of trade. A vast geography of opportunity that bridged thousands of miles in a single journey. To understand Musa's world, you have to strip away the modern idea of emptiness. You have to see the sand as a road, a deliberate, dangerous, and incredibly lucrative highway connecting two civilizations, turning a sea of dust into a gateway for empires to rise. You are looking at a man who didn't just command an empire, he held the keys to the world's most concentrated hoard of wealth. Imagine walking into his presence and realizing that every ounce of power he wielded was backed by something far more tangible than loyalty or law. He didn't just rule land, he sat atop the largest known deposits of gold in the known world, in an era where gold wasn't just a luxury, but the very foundation of sovereignty. His position was absolute. To his enemies, that wealth was a target. To his subjects, it was the source of their survival. Every mountain and valley under his dominion served as a silent vault, containing a metallic fortune so vast it could collapse markets or forge dynasties overnight. When you realize what sat beneath his feet, the nature of his authority shifts from mere politics to something far more primal. He wasn't just a king, he was the gatekeeper of the world's primary reserve. Every decree he issued and every war he waged was fueled by that subterranean weight. You have to understand, in his kingdom, the ground itself was screaming with value. To challenge him wasn't just an act of rebellion against a man, it was an attempt to seize the very substance that defined global power for centuries. Imagine holding a fortune in your hands, only to realize it is a prison of gold, frozen and useless because the world around you has shifted. You have the assets, but you lack the mobility to keep them. This is the silent trap of stagnant wealth, the terrifying reality that riches are nothing if they are anchored in place. But history took a sharp turn toward liberation when one man dared to challenge the very concept of ownership. In 1324, he embarked on a pilgrimage that would fundamentally rewrite the rules of the physical and financial world. This wasn't just a religious journey, it was an architectural revolution for capital. He realized that for wealth to have power, it had to be fluid. It had to move across borders, through gates, and beyond the reach of local walls. By navigating this perilous 1324 pilgrimage, he broke the chains of static accumulation. He transformed having into moving. His actions created a blueprint for portability, ensuring that value could travel as fast as an idea. This transition changed history forever because it decoupled prosperity from geography. Every modern movement of global capital traces its lineage back to that specific trek. He didn't just find a way to carry wealth, he discovered the mechanism to make it move, and in doing so, he unlocked the door to the modern world. Imagine walking into a room where the mere presence of one man could collapse an entire economy. Most rulers throughout history sought security through a small circle of elite guards, a private militia to protect their crown from common thieves or rival spies. But for Mansa Musa, protection wasn't just about stopping a blade, it was about projecting a power so absolute it redefined the very concept of wealth. He didn't just travel with a guard. He moved with a caravan of 60,000 people. Picture the ground shaking beneath the weight of thousands of feet, a moving city stretching across the desert sands, and more importantly, the staggering weight of thousands of pounds of pure gold. This wasn't just a journey, it was a calculated display of dominance that forced every nation he entered to witness his impossible riches. He didn't just carry wealth, he flooded the world with it. Every gram of gold moved by his caravan became a tool of influence, turning neighbors into subjects and spectators into witnesses of a kingdom so rich it could reshape markets. You have to wonder, when you see something that overwhelming, do you feel inspired, or do you realize how vulnerable your own world is compared to the sheer scale of his empire? He didn't just travel, he redefined what it meant to be untouchable. You are looking at a man who didn't just travel for faith, he traveled as a warning. When he set foot on the path toward Mecca, he wasn't just a pilgrim seeking spiritual solace. He was a walking billboard for an empire that dared to rival the very foundations of global power. He carried with him something far more dangerous than personal devotion. He was showcasing the terrifying scale of Mali's resources to the entire Islamic world. Imagine standing before him and seeing not just a man, but the physical manifestation of gold and salt, wealth so vast it could destabilize markets and rewrite the hierarchy of continents. Every caravaner and merchant along the route would see the sheer volume of wealth accumulating in his wake, a visible display of Mali's dominance that sent a chilling message to every rival power. He was signaling that Mali wasn't just a neighbor. It was an economic titan with resources deep enough to fund armies and build empires. This wasn't a private journey, it was a calculated exhibition of state power. By traveling these roads, he turned the pilgrimage into a geopolitical statement. He forced every observer to confront a terrifying reality. Mali sat upon a throne of riches, so immense that no one else could ignore its shadow. Imagine holding something so valuable that its mere presence could collapse an entire empire's economy overnight. You might think gold is just a metal, but for the people of ancient Egypt, it was the very pulse of their survival, and one man's staggering generosity turned that pulse into a fatal hemorrhage. When he began distributing massive quantities of gold as gifts, he wasn't just performing an act of charity, he was unknowingly detonating a financial time bomb. The sheer volume of gold flowing out of his hands was so immense, it didn't just circulate, it flooded the system, diluting the currency and destabilizing the very foundations of trade. Watch closely as the math of history takes hold. When a precious metal becomes too common, its power to command value evaporates instantly. In Egypt, this wasn't a metaphor, it was a literal economic hemorrhage. The local markets were overwhelmed, the value of the coin plummeted, and the stability of the state began to bleed out in real time. Every ounce he handed away moved the needle closer to a total systemic collapse. He thought he was bestowing wealth upon his subjects, but he was actually draining the lifeblood of the economy, proving that when something becomes too common, it ceases to be precious and begins to become dangerous. Imagine standing in a crowded marketplace where the very foundation of your survival, the currency in your pocket, evaporates in a heartbeat. You think your wealth is safe, but in Cairo, a single man named Musa was about to prove how fragile value truly is. Picture the heavy, glittering weight of gold coins. For centuries, these were the ultimate store of value, a shield against famine and theft. But when Musa took action, he didn't just trade goods. He unleashed a flood that overwhelmed the limits of human systems. He began giving away more wealth than the city's entire economy could possibly absorb. It wasn't just a gift, it was an economic overload. In an instant, the sheer volume of gold flowing into the streets hit a breaking point. The supply surged so violently that the market couldn't find its footing. Because there was suddenly too much of everything, the value of every single piece of gold plummeted instantly. It became common as dirt, stripped of its power to command trade. You can see the panic in the eyes of the merchants as they realize that when a system is overwhelmed by an abundance it wasn't built to handle, the rules change forever. Musa's actions didn't just move money, they broke the very concept of value for everyone watching. You think power is something you can simply seize, but in his hands, that very grab for dominance became a poison that would seep into every pocket and household for years to come. You might believe that by consolidating this specific authority, he was securing his throne, but what he was actually doing was setting a ticking time bomb within the nation's very survival. He didn't just grab a seat of power, he dismantled the invisible guardrails that kept prices stable. This wasn't a calculated move for growth, it was a catastrophic miscalculation that sparked a decade-long inflation crisis. Imagine waking up every morning to find your hard-earned savings losing their value, the cost of bread climbing, and the basic necessities of life becoming luxuries you can no longer afford. For 10 years, the currency would bleed out, eroding the stability of families who had no warning that their wealth was being traded for a fleeting moment of political dominance. He traded the long-term security of the people for a short-term surge in his own influence. Now, look at the wreckage left behind, a decade of economic erosion where the currency became a ghost of its former self, and the cost of existence skyrocketed beyond control. The power he gained was a hollow shell. The only thing that remained was a crisis that wouldn't end for a generation. You are watching a masterclass in how an empire is built not through gold, but through influence, a strategy hidden in plain sight while everyone else was looking at the price tags. While the world panicked over his spending, Musa was executing a masterstroke of soft power that no modern billionaire can replicate. To the critics and the headlines, it looked like reckless excess. To those who understood the architecture of power, it was a calculated investment in cultural dominance. They saw the costs, but they missed the conquest. He wasn't just buying assets, he was weaving his name into the very fabric of daily life, ensuring that every transaction became an endorsement and every luxury became a symbol of status that others would crave to imitate. In today's era of transparent ledgers and fiscal scrutiny, this kind of invisible influence is nearly impossible to manufacture. He understood something modern moguls have forgotten. True power isn't found in the balance sheet of a bank account, but in the psychological grip over a culture's desires. While his rivals were counting pennies, Musa was buying loyalty, prestige, and an untouchable legacy. He didn't just want to be wealthy, he wanted to be indispensable. He played a game where the stakes weren't just millions of dollars, but the very authority to define what it means to be powerful in the modern age. You think you know what it means to spend money, but imagine a world where every coin spent was a calculated strike against ignorance itself. You might see a transaction as a simple loss of currency, but for him, he was constructing something far more permanent. He wasn't just spending, he was investing in the intellectual infrastructure of the medieval world. Every gold piece and scrap of parchment wasn't vanishing into some void of luxury. It was being forged into the very foundation upon which the future would be built. Think about what that actually means for a society trapped in the shadows of the Middle Ages. It meant building the roads, the libraries, and the networks of thought that allowed human knowledge to survive the crushing weight of time. By funding these specific institutions, he was ensuring that ideas wouldn't just flicker and die like a candle in the wind, but would instead become part of a permanent architecture. He saw the currency not as metal, but as a tool for preservation. Every contract signed and every scroll commissioned served as a brick in a fortress of learning. He understood a truth that most people today forget. If you don't invest in the systems that carry your knowledge forward, that knowledge will be erased. He was building an empire of the mind. You are looking at a moment in history where a single decision could have erased an entire civilization's future. Imagine standing on the precipice of total intellectual stagnation, where the very tools needed to build a society were being systematically stripped away by time and ignorance. But then, a shift occurred that changed everything for your ancestors. He didn't just bring back gold, he brought back architects, scholars, and engineers from across the Islamic world. Think about what that means. Gold is a finite resource, a heavy metal that can be spent and lost in a single season of greed. But the mines he secured, those were the blueprints for survival. He wasn't just hunting for wealth to fill a treasury, he was harvesting the human capital required to build empires. By pulling architects from distant lands, he secured the geometry of cities. By bringing back engineers, he ensured the flow of water and the strength of fortifications. And by gathering scholars, he preserved the very knowledge that allowed a society to think, innovate, and endure. Every bridge built, every complex irrigation system designed, and every law codified was a direct result of these minds crossing borders. He realized that while gold buys luxury, it is the architect's vision and the engineer's precision that build a legacy that survives the grave. Imagine your world shrinking until your only connection to the outside is a single, fragile thread. If that thread snaps, your entire culture, history, and identity vanish overnight. For the desert-bound scholars of West Africa, this wasn't a hypothetical fear, it was a looming reality. They didn't just stumble into greatness by accident. Timbuktu did not become a global epicenter of learning through some stroke of cosmic luck or a happy coincidence of geography. Instead, its rise was engineered, a calculated masterpiece of survival and expansion. It began with Musa's deliberate geopolitical strategy. He recognized that to protect the knowledge of his people, he had to weave it into the very fabric of global trade routes. He wasn't just building a library, he was constructing a fortress of intellect. By positioning Timbuktu as a mandatory waypoint for caravans and scholars alike, Musa ensured that the city became a magnet for the world's greatest minds. Every mosque built and every manuscript preserved was a move on a massive geopolitical chessboard designed to secure a permanent seat at the table of global civilization. He understood that in a changing world, isolation is death, but strategic integration is power. Timbuktu didn't just happen, it was forged by a leader who knew that to preserve a culture's soul, you must first make it indispensable to the world around it. Imagine walking through a city where every cobblestone is paved in precious metal, and your very survival depends on a currency so abundant it feels like an impossibility. For the common people of the Middle Ages, the sheer scale of his fortune wasn't just impressive, it was terrifying. It was something so fundamentally unthinkable that it warped the way history was recorded. Look closely at the European maps of the 1300, and you will see the truth hidden in plain sight. These weren't just geographical charts, they were records of a man whose wealth defied the logic of the era. Cartographers, tasked with documenting the known world, didn't have the words to describe his riches in standard terms, so they resorted to a desperate visual shorthand. They depicted him as a literal king of gold. This wasn't a poetic metaphor. It was an admission that his wealth had transcended human scale. On those ancient parchments, he didn't just own land or trade goods, he He embodied the very substance of wealth itself. When you trace your finger over those 14th century lines, you are looking at the moment where reality became so extreme that it turned into a myth. They couldn't wrap their minds around how one man could command such concentrated power. So they etched him into the map as a sovereign of gold, a permanent, shimmering warning of what happens when wealth becomes absolute. Imagine standing on the edge of a known coastline, staring at a piece of parchment that holds the power to make you a king or bury you forever in the deep. You aren't just looking at ink and paper, you are looking at a calculated trap. For centuries, these maps were used to lure explorers toward West Africa, fueled by the myth of his infinite riches. They weren't mere navigational tools, they were seductive blueprints of greed. Every coastline drawn and every gold mine whispered in the margins served as a siren song for those desperate to claim a fortune that supposedly had no end. When you look at these documents today, you have to ask, were the explorers being guided toward wealth, or were they being led into a labyrinth of obsession? The infinite riches, promised by legend, acted as a psychological magnet, pulling men across violent oceans and into uncharted territories where the line between opportunity and catastrophe vanished. They followed the lines on the page, blinded by the lure of gold, never realizing that the map was designed to feed a hunger that could never be satisfied. Every stroke of the pen was a hook, catching the ambitions of empires. You can still see it in the faded ink, the way the myth of wealth overshadowed the lethal reality of the unknown journey ahead. You are looking at a void in the archives, a deliberate erasure of a truth so disruptive that it was systematically scrubbed from your textbooks. Think for a moment, if a piece of history is missing, someone decided it was dangerous for you to know it existed. We are taught what to remember, but we are rarely told what was intentionally forgotten. This isn't just a lapse in memory, it is a calculated removal of a narrative that challenged the established status quo of the West. But why did this specific story almost vanish from your history books? Why did the ink fade on these pages until the truth became a ghost? The answer lies in the power of narrative control. When a fact threatens to destabilize a foundational myth, it becomes a liability. It is buried under layers of standard curriculum and convenient omissions until it feels like a myth rather than a documented reality. Every time you encounter a gap in your education, you are standing on the edge of a hidden truth that someone else wanted suppressed. We are currently peeling back those layers, exposing the stitches where the truth was torn out. You aren't just looking at a missing chapter, you are witnessing the very mechanism of how history is manufactured for the masses. The question is no longer why it was hidden, but what happens now that it's coming to light. You have been told a lie about history, a convenient myth designed to keep you from seeing the true scale of what was lost. Look closely at the maps of the past and ask yourself why certain empires were erased while others were mythologized. It wasn't an accident of geography, it was a calculated choice of narrative. Because it was easier for the Western imagination to treat Mali as a mystical land than to acknowledge a black king who outpaced every European monarch in wealth. Power and influence. Imagine a throne so heavy with gold that it shifted the very foundations of global trade. A kingdom that didn't just participate in the world economy, but dictated its flow. If they had admitted the reality of this African empire, they would have had to admit that a black ruler possessed a sophistication and a treasury that dwarfed the monarchs of the West. Instead, they chose the veil of mystery. They traded hard facts for mysticism, turning a powerhouse of civilization into a fairy tale land of legends. By framing Mali as something magical rather than something superior, they could ignore the uncomfortable truth that while Europe was struggling to find its footing, a black king sat upon a throne of unmatched prosperity. The mystery wasn't in the soil, it was in the fact they couldn't let you see his true power. You could be standing in a market today and believe that wealth is simply a number on a screen, but for him, wealth was something much more visceral. It was the literal power to dictate who lived, who traded, and who thrived. Look closely at the gold he held in his hands. It wasn't just heavy metal, it was the fuel of an empire. But here is the truth that most people miss. The gold was merely the trophy, while the true power lay hidden in the geography beneath his feet. The real scale of his wealth resided in the stability of the trade routes he controlled. Imagine a world where every caravan, every merchant ship, and every desperate traveler depended on a single path to survive. If those roads were safe, he was a king. If they were blocked, the economy collapsed into chaos. By securing these veins of commerce, he didn't just own gold, he owned the very flow of life across continents. He controlled the pulse of trade, ensuring that every transaction and every shipment moved with clockwork precision under his watchful eye. He wasn't just a merchant, he was the architect of the infrastructure. You aren't looking at a man who was lucky to find wealth. You are looking at a man who engineered a system so stable that it became the backbone of an entire civilization's survival. Imagine standing at a literal breaking point where one wrong step means total ruin or unimaginable wealth. You are looking at a man who doesn't just inhabit the desert, he masters it. He sits at the crossroads of the Trans-Saharan trade, a position of absolute power that would make modern empires tremble. In his hands, he holds the leash on the flow of salt and gold, the two most vital commodities of the era. To understand his power, you have to understand what these substances meant for survival. Salt wasn't just a seasoning, it was a biological necessity, the only way to preserve life and food in a scorching world. Gold was the heartbeat of global currency, the literal weight of authority. By controlling both, he controlled the very pulse of the economy. Every merchant caravan, every desperate trader, and every ambitious ruler had to pass through his shadow. He wasn't just a merchant. He was the gatekeeper of survival. If he closed the gate, the trade died. If he opened it, he commanded the wealth of nations. You are looking at a masterclass in strategic positioning, a man who realized that true power isn't found in owning the product, but in controlling the path where the world must travel to find it. He stood where two worlds collided, turning the harsh sands into a kingdom of profit. Imagine standing over a vein of raw gold and realizing that every piece of jewelry on your body and every circuit board in your pocket depends entirely on what lies beneath your feet. If you had owned Mali today, you wouldn't just be a landowner. You would hold the keys to a kingdom of wealth so vast it would redefine your status on the global stage. You would control a massive percentage of the world's precious metal supply before it ever hit the open market. Think about that sequence. The moment those minerals are pulled from the earth, they belong to you. They aren't just rocks. They are the backbone of modern technology and the ultimate store of value. By controlling this territory, you would sit at the very top of a global supply chain, dictating terms to industries that can never afford to go without. You would possess leverage over international markets before a single gram is traded by others. While the rest of the world competes for scraps in the marketplace, you would own the source itself. It's the ultimate hidden gatekeeper position, controlling the raw material that powers our modern civilization. In this game of global economics, owning Mali means holding the leverage over the very metals that make the world move. You wouldn't just be part of the economy, you would be the one deciding who gets to participate in it. You could be looking at the very foundation of your own financial security right now, unaware that it was built upon a gamble so audacious it should have been illegal. You might think history is a collection of dusty dates and settled accounts, but some names remain etched into the bedrock of our systems because they represent a turning point from which there was no going back. There is a reason his name is still whispered in circles of economic history today. It isn't just a footnote, it is a haunting echo in the halls of global finance. When you hear that name, you aren't just hearing a man from the past, you are hearing the blueprint for how modern wealth is manufactured and manipulated. He didn't just participate in the market, he rewrote the rules of engagement while everyone else was still playing by the old ones. Every time a trade is executed or a currency shifts, his ghost remains in the machinery. Why do historians still lean in when his name is mentioned? Because it signals a moment where risk became absolute and policy became personal. He represents the ultimate insider secret, the realization that the systems we rely on today were forged in a furnace of high-stakes decisions that most people would never survive. Stay with me, because to understand him is to understand the hidden mechanics of the world you inhabit. You might believe that your bank account is your shield, but what if I told you that the numbers on your screen are actually a measure of how much power someone else can exert over your every move? You think wealth is a fortress of safety, but in the eyes of the elite, it's something far more calculated and predatory. He stripped away the illusion of savings to reveal a chilling underlying truth. True wealth isn't about what you own, it is about how much influence your resources can exert over the lives of others. Think about that for a second. When you hold capital, you aren't just holding currency, you are holding the ability to command, to move pieces on a board, and to dictate the boundaries of someone else's freedom. He proved that every dollar is a lever, if you have it. Others must bend to your will. If they have it, you are subject to their rules. This isn't just a theory of economics, it is a study of human leverage. By shifting the definition from possession to influence, he exposed the invisible strings that pull at the fabric of our daily lives. You aren't just looking at a pile of gold, you are looking at a mechanism of control. Once you see how influence flows through wealth, you can never look at a transaction the same way again. You are walking through a world of glass walls, a world where every cent must be tracked, every move audited, and every secret exposed before it can even be whispered. Today, if you want to build an empire, you are shackled by layers of regulation and the crushing weight of transparency. You are watched, but imagine for a moment what happens when those barriers simply do not exist. Imagine a world where the line between legal and illegal isn't drawn by a committee, but by the sheer will of one man. While modern billionaires are restricted by oversight and buried under mountains of compliance, Musa operated in an era where he was the law. He didn't navigate the system, he replaced it. In his domain, there were no regulatory hurdles to slow his momentum or transparency requirements to expose his secrets. He moved with a terrifying freedom that today's billionaires would trade their entire fortunes just to possess. He wasn't just breaking the rules, he was operating in a reality where the rules hadn't been written yet. To understand how he built his shadow empire, You have to stop thinking about what is permitted and start looking at what is possible when there is no one left to say no. In that era, power wasn't granted by a license. It was seized by an absolute authority. Think about the last time you felt truly powerless against a force you couldn't see, a movement moving faster than your ability to track it. Now imagine a man who moved mountains without ever touching a screen or sending a single digital signal. In an era where your reach is measured in likes and your voice is filtered through algorithms, his strategy was primal. He didn't need a tech platform to reach millions. His physical presence was the only broadcast required. While we rely on fiber optics to connect us, he relied on the raw, undeniable electricity of human proximity. He understood a fundamental law of survival, that the most potent way to command an audience isn't through a glowing rectangle in your pocket, but through the sheer weight of a human body standing in a space, demanding attention. Every word he spoke didn't travel through cables, it traveled through air and bone. He turned his own existence into a signal so loud it bypassed every gatekeeper and every firewall. You can't mute him with a button or shadow him with a block. He occupied the physical world so completely that he forced millions to stop, look, and listen. By stripping away the digital layer, he exposed the raw truth of influence, that sometimes to truly move a crowd, you don't need an app, you just need to stand in front of them. You think your digital portfolio represents true power, but you're actually staring at a shadow of a much more terrifying reality. In our modern world, we measure influence by ticker symbols and flickering pixels on glowing screens, tracking billions of dollars as if these numbers are the ultimate ceiling of human achievement. We believe that because we can see it, we have mastered it, but there is a profound, haunting irony hidden in the math of history. While you watch your apps update in real time, Musa's wealth remains the definitive benchmark for untouchable scale. It isn't just about the quantity of gold or the size of the empire, it is the sheer, overwhelming magnitude that defies modern calculation. Most of what we track today is volatile. It can evaporate with a single market crash or a shift in public sentiment. Musa's wealth, however, exists on a different plane of existence entirely. It represents a level of accumulation so vast and so foundational that it dwarfs our contemporary systems of exchange. When you compare your digital figures to his legacy, the gap isn't just wide, it's an abyss. We are playing in a sandbox while he moved mountains. You can keep watching your screen, but never forget. Some scales are so massive they remain unreachable by any modern standard. You are walking on ground that was forged by a shadow, a man whose fingerprints are still etched into the very maps you use to navigate your world today. You might believe the borders and territories around you are accidents of history, but they are actually the calculated blueprints of a massive, invisible conquest. To understand how his empire fundamentally reshaped modern geography, you have to look past the surface of our current maps and see the veins of trade that he carved into the earth centuries ago. He didn't just move wealth, he moved the very foundations of where we live and how we travel. Yet, despite the massive scale of his influence, he remains the ultimate ghost of the gold trade, a phantom presence in every vault and every vein of gold ever extracted from the dirt. His name is whispered in the halls of economics, but his face is hidden behind the sheer magnitude of his legacy. Every ounce of gold that moved through his network redefined power, shifting empires and building cities that still stand today. If you want to pull back the veil on these forgotten corridors of power and see how his invisible hand still steers our global landscape, hit subscribe. It's time to uncover the hidden histories buried beneath the soil of our modern world.